Grandma Mi. My name is Oh Jung Hien Vien, but people usually just call me Oh Jung. I'm a low-ranking reporter working at one of the big editorial offices in the city, so my job is probably heavier than most of my colleagues. Gathering news, writing articles, submitting reports, the same old repetitive work over and over again. It's honestly tiring me out. But then again, making it to this glamorous city of Beijing isn't exactly a bad thing. One morning, I had just gotten out of bed when my phone rang. As soon as I picked up, I heard my mother's voice, but it sounded different than usual. Sorrowful. "Come home right away," she said. "Grandma Mi doesn't have much time left." Ever since my second uncle passed away, the feeling of losing a loved one had gradually faded into the background. But now, getting that sudden call felt like a lump of salt had clogged my chest. I was instantly overwhelmed. I put the phone down and called my boss to ask for a few days off. Grandma Mi's surname wasn't actually Mi. No one really remembers what it was anymore. People called her that because she used to treat kids with wind scraping, acupuncture, or even ghost expelling. She liked using a bamboo tube filled with rice for healing, so eventually everyone just started calling her Grandma Mi, and she actually liked that name. According to seniority, she was technically the aunt of my maternal grandfather, so I could have called her maternal great-great-aunt, but that was way too complicated. Everyone just called her Grandma Mi. Every time someone called her name, she would close her eyes and try her best to open them, then shuffle over slowly with her tiny 3-inch bound feet, step by step. When I got home, my mother's face, which I hadn't seen in a long time, was filled with sorrow. Not surprising, despite the distant bloodline, Grandma Mi had once soothed the hair and heads of countless children. Not just us, but almost every kid in the surrounding villages grew up healthy under her care. After exchanging a few words with my mom, we headed to her house. A crowd had already gathered there, young and old, all wearing solemn expressions. The kids were biting their lips, and from the way they stood in silence, it was clear they knew she was inside and didn't dare disturb her. Mom led me inside. Grandma Mi was lying on a bamboo mat, one of her many peculiarities. No matter the season, spring, summer, fall, or winter, she always slept on this mat. She'd been doing so for over 50 years, and the mat had turned red with time. She was barely hanging on. I could hear her heavy, labored breathing from the room. Mom and Grandma softly told her that I had arrived. Of all her descendants, she adored me the most. Perhaps because I bore a strong resemblance to her youngest and favorite son, the one who also caused her the most grief. Although she'd treated many patients throughout her life, her own fate had been filled with hardship. Grandma once told me she had given birth to 6 children, none of whom lived past 1 year old. When the 6th one died, she went mad, throwing herself at the grave, screaming and digging at the soil with her bare hands. The 7th child, her beloved son, was extraordinarily bright. He got into Tsinghua University in the 1960s. Everyone thought Grandma Mi's hard days were over. But then, during a political riot in Beijing, her son was struck by a stray bullet and died on the spot. The news nearly shattered her. She didn't speak for a whole month. But a month later, she rolled up her sleeves and resumed treating people with her acupuncture needles and the bamboo tube. "Luke, you and your mother step outside. I want to speak to Kwong Kwong alone." Suddenly, Grandma Mi pushed herself up with surprising strength. I was stunned. Grandma had been declared on the brink of death. Yet here she was, sitting up. But the way she sat, her body so frail, skin clinging to bone, made it painful to look at. As she rose, she broke into a fierce coughing fit. Luke was my mother's nickname. After she and Grandma left, it was just me and Grandma Mi in the small room. I pulled over a little stool and sat beside her, gripping her cold, bony hand, the rough ridges of her knuckles sharply distinct under my palm. Tears streamed down her face as she gently stroked my head with her trembling other hand. "So alike. So very alike," she whispered. "Grandma Mi, please take care of yourself," I said, feeling a tight ache in my chest. As a child, I always thought she was magical, able to cure even the strangest illnesses. I never imagined I'd one day see her like this, frail and fading. "Kwong, Do you know why I wanted to speak to you alone? She asked in a slow, heavy voice. I had to guess several times to understand her meaning. I shook my head. She reached under her pillow and pulled out what looked like a book, though it didn't quite resemble one. This is a record of my lifetime of experiences, including the methods I use to treat illnesses and ward off evil spirits. I've always seen you as Duk Lap, her deceased son. Now that I'm leaving, I want to pass it on to you. If you like it, read it. If not, burn it. After saying that, she fell into another fit of coughing, then closed her eyes and spoke no more. I called out to her a few times, but she just waved me away, motioning for me to leave. 4 hours later, she passed away. People came daily to pay their respects. On the day of her burial, almost everyone from the region showed up. I suddenly recalled a saying, if you want to know whether someone was a good person, just look at how many people come to their funeral. Grandma Mi came into this world alone, and she left it the same way. I carefully stored the book she left me and rushed back to the editorial office once the funeral ended. As soon as I wrapped up my work, I began reading the belongings she had entrusted to me. To call it a book wasn't quite accurate. It was more of a notebook. The writing was messy and old, the pages a faded brownish yellow. The text was written with a calligraphy brush in vertical lines. For her time, writing so much was probably quite rare. It was hard to read, so I began copying it. But the more I copied, the more uneasy I felt. The contents weren't about medicine at all. It was more like witchcraft. It seemed she had secretly learned it from an old neighbor. It said that learning this kind of thing requires talent and fate. The notebook also described how she began exorcising spirits when she was young and hinted at the reasons behind her children's early deaths. She wasn't like the sorcerers in movies, able to summon storms or command spirits, but she could do things we couldn't explain. Her writing mixed with local dialects, many of which I didn't understand. I had to consult quite a few people to piece together the general meaning. One day, a woman came to me with a 7 or 8-year-old boy under her arm. The child stared blankly ahead like a wooden statue. It was freezing cold, yet snot trickled from his nose unchecked. He didn't seem to feel it. In the end, the woman had to wipe it for him. I had a feeling. The child was possessed. Sure enough, the woman told me the boy was her sister's son. His parents had gone away for work and left him in her care. At first, he was a lively, energetic boy, always full of spirit. But suddenly, about a week ago, he changed. He turned silent and vacant. With no other option, they came to me. I hesitated. I didn't want to get involved. My elders used to say that if a woman is married and wants to bear children, she shouldn't meddle in these things. Otherwise, disaster will befall her children. But that's just an old legend. I looked at the boy and, in the end, agreed to help. As usual, I asked everyone else to leave and brought the child into my treatment room. It was a small room, barely enough for 4 or 5 people. No electric lights, and the windows were always sealed. Inside was only an altar with a statue of Guanyin and some always burning candles. I lit incense, took out my bamboo rice tube filled with consecrated rice, and waved it in front of the boy's face. When I was little and had a fever, I vaguely remember her waving that thing at me too, and I'd get better immediately. I held the boy's left hand. Between his thumb and index finger, there was a distinct blue-black line, thick like a worm, and it bulged noticeably. Definitely possessed. Children have weak souls. When startled or terrified, their spirits can flee. If caught early, they can still be called back. All I had to do was drive the ghost away and treat the blood vessels with acupuncture. I opened the bamboo tube. The rice inside had sunken in the center and risen around the edges, with 3 small holes forming at random points. I looked into the child's mouth under the candlelight. On his tongue was a blister. In normal circumstances, I'd pierce the blister with a silver needle, give him a couple of acupuncture jabs, and that'd be it. But maybe I was wrong. I had just picked up the acupuncture needle, walking behind to prepare to pierce the dew point on the back of the hand, near the Taiyong and small intestine meridians between the shoulder blades, when it suddenly let out a giggle. The sound wasn't like that of a child. It was more like the laugh of a grown woman. "Why are you laughing?" "Let Auntie give you a little poke. It won't hurt, and you'll feel better right away." I held the needle, ready to press it in. The child slowly turned its head. When it got to the shoulder, there was a loud crack, and the entire head twisted around. Its eyes stared straight at me, and a bit of drool hung from its mouth. I was terrified, dropped to the floor on my butt, and even lost the strength to scream. "You saved someone else's child, so give me yours," it suddenly said in a strange voice. I shut my eyes, and when I opened them again, the child was still sitting there calmly, back turned to me, not moving at all. I cautiously stood up, walked over to check its face. Everything seemed normal. I thought maybe I had seen wrong. So I followed through as usual, sticking a few needles, down the neck and under the armpit. The child quickly recovered and was fine that night. The aunt was delighted and took the child home. Before leaving, the child smiled at me, a smile that sent a chill through me. For the first few days, I was a bit spooked and even thought about no longer treating anyone. But nothing else happened, and gradually I forgot. Soon after, I had Dai Lap, me boss firstborn. When he was born, he was fair and plump. The whole family was overjoyed. But come June, one morning I woke up to find his face had turned purple. I was a healer myself. I knew the child couldn't be saved. But I still frantically called for help. In the end, Dai Lap died. He died with a stiff smile on his face. Looking back, that smile looked just like the one that child had. At the time, I didn't remember what that strange child had said. I just blamed my fate for being cruel. But that was only the beginning. Over the next 10 years, I gave birth to 5 more children. Each time, they died in infancy. The oldest didn't even make it to 1 year. When the 6th child was born, I poured all my heart into raising him. He grew up well, and I thought maybe the bad luck had passed. But one summer night, I heard someone calling my name from outside. When I stepped out, no one was there. When I returned inside, the child had stopped breathing. I truly went mad. Each child was my own flesh and blood. Losing them was like carving flesh from my own bones. I started to suspect it had to do with the child from 10 years ago. But what could I do now? I soon became pregnant again. This time, I threw away all the clothes and things from the previous children. I decided I would treat this child like my firstborn and raise it anew. Duk Lap was born. I gave him every last bit of strength I had. But ever since his birth, he cried endlessly, from day to night. His cries were shrill and piercing. I tried everything, but nothing worked. I started to become afraid. I regretted ever treating that other child. Then one day our neighbor, a tall, strong man from the northeast, who was always kind to us, came over. That day, he was working the night shift. The baby kept crying. I was trying to calm him when he suddenly barged in like a demon and shouted, crying and crying, "Are you mourning someone?" He scared me stiff. Then he stormed in, slapped Duk Lap across the face, and just like that, the baby stopped crying. I thought the slap had stunned him, but from that day on, he never cried again. He grew up healthy. But the northeastern man was bedridden not long after and eventually died from illness. His family members also became ill and died one after another. I knew then, whatever had been in Duk Lap had left him. That man had become the scapegoat. When Duk Lap grew older, I took him to the man's grave to kneel and pay respects. I told him, this man was his great benefactor. Although I felt sorrow, I also felt joy, because I believed my son would now be safe. But that was only what I thought. Duk Lap was exceptionally gifted, so much so that it surprised even me. I wasn't smart, and his father was just a kind basket weaver. Yet this child was brilliant from the start. He never smiled. Always had a straight face. Aside from me, he rarely spoke to anyone. I continued treating the sick around our neighborhood. My reputation grew. Before the Cultural Revolution began, Duc Lap was accepted into Tsinghua University. The night before he left, we talked late into the night. He held my hand and said, "You and father raised me with so much hardship. I'll study hard and repay you both." What could be more joyous than hearing something like that from your own child? We reminisced about everything from his childhood. After he went to Beijing, he sometimes mailed back color photographs. At the time, color photos weren't common, most were black and white. I pulled out the photo, wanting to see if he'd lost weight. But the moment I looked at it, I froze. He was smiling in the picture. That smile, I knew it too well. It was the same one I had seen again and again in the past. My vision dimmed. That smile seemed to mock my ignorance and foolishness. I went nearly mad and desperately wanted to go to Beijing to find him. But the Cultural Revolution quickly swept the country. People like me, healers and spirit mediums, were denounced. I didn't care what insults they hurled at me. I just begged them to let me go to Beijing. But it was no use. 6 months later, the news of Duc Lap's death arrived. This time, I didn't cry. But Duc Lap's father was so heartbroken he passed away shortly after. For the next week, I locked myself in a room. There was only one thought in my head. Saving people, accumulating virtue. Was even that a mistake? I refused to treat any more children. No matter how they begged or cursed, I would not do it. I once went to visit the aunt, to ask about that child. The child had grown up healthy. Still was. That brought me a small measure of peace. Maybe someone like me isn't meant to have children. Or maybe all the children I ever treated were my children too. Once I made peace with that, I started helping again, doing everything I could for those poor kids. Through them, I could find what I had lost. At this point in the notebook, I discovered a folded piece of paper inside. It was old and fragile, but the quality of the paper was surprisingly good. I carefully unfolded it. It was a chart of acupuncture points on the human body, listing specific points to treat different illnesses. I couldn't make much sense of it, but thought I'd keep it for when Kai Nan returned. He might understand. On the back were even more stories of how she treated children, mostly the same. Sunstroke, high fevers. If they came to her just once and she pricked a needle to loosen their tendons, they'd immediately feel better. It was miraculous. One final page caught my attention. It detailed how to use rice to summon spirits. That was why she was called Mi Ba, Rice Woman. To summon spirits with rice, use a bamboo tube filled with freshly harvested early season rice. Soak a white cloth in boiling water, dry it in a shady place. Before the ritual, purify your body and mind. Cover the bamboo tube with the cloth and place both hands around it. Sit before the table, calm your heart, close your eyes. Silently call out the spirit's name as it was in life. No nicknames or titles. If the bamboo grows cold, the spirit has arrived. The process had to be done in complete darkness. Adding personal belongings of the deceased into the tube increased the chances of success. Before the spirit leaves, do not remove your hands or uncover the cloth. I followed the instructions exactly, using the same bamboo tube Mi Ba had used in life. I called out to her in my heart. Sure enough, the bamboo tube started turning cold, so cold I could barely hold it. It felt like a block of ice. The rice inside was jumping, as if boiling, though the cloth remained still. Just when I was about to let go, a shadowy figure appeared across the table. My eyes were foggy, but the image became clearer and clearer. It was Mi Ba. Her face was a little darker, but otherwise just as I remembered. I couldn't help calling out, "Mi Ba!" and started to get up, but she raised a hand to stop me, smiling at me. Strangely, she didn't say anything. Just sat there. "Mi Ba, can't you talk?" She nodded. It seemed I still couldn't fully connect with the dead like she could. But seeing her was enough. She sat silently, a little blurry, but she felt real. "Mi Ba, now that you're gone, what should the children do if they get sick? If it's just minor illnesses, it's fine. But if they're possessed or worse, what then?" She smiled again and pointed at me. I asked. You mean me? She nodded, then raised a thumb. The bamboo tube slowly began warming again. Her figure faded. I knew she was leaving. Still, I stood to go to her. But the moment I lifted my hands, the cloth came off. In an instant, she vanished. I stood there dumbfounded. The white cloth had lifted, and the rice inside was spinning like an hourglass, twirling at high speed around the tube's inner walls before slowly coming to a stop. I immediately looked through the book. There it was. If you release the cloth during summoning, the spirit can never be called again. I'd never see Meebar again. On the last page of the book was a small pouch. Inside were more than 10 silver needles, her tools for healing. There was also an old yellowed photograph. On the back, written in beautiful fountain pen handwriting, were the words, "To the mother I love most." I quickly flipped it over. A tall young man wearing glasses stood in front of Tsinghua University. Could this be Meebar's son? I brought the photo to the light for a closer look. I was nearly scared out of my skin. He looked so much like me. But that smile, it was unbearable. So forced, so unsettling. Under the sunlight, the photograph reacted strangely. Worried I might damage it, I gently tried to pick it up. But something felt wrong. I flipped it back over, and screamed. From behind me, Boss Sun, 2 pale hands had reached forward, pulling his face into that eerie smile.